In a step away from Bethesda's catalog of post-apocalyptic wastelands and dragon-infested fantasy realms comes the dystopian death arena of Brink, a team-oriented first-person shooter from the minds behind the Enemy Territory games. Pairing a heavy focus on class-based multiplayer with a prominent parkour element, Brink constantly seems on the verge of something great. Does it deliver more than just a hash of interesting ideas? The looming resource shortages of tomorrow are a present-day problem for the Ark, a massive ocean-borne refuge whose population has grown much too fast, much too soon. After countless struggles over dwindling supplies and habitable space, war finally erupts between the forces vying for change and the powers struggling to maintain order. Right at the outset, Brink gives you the option to take up arms with either Ark security or the Rebel Uprising. While the decision ultimately amounts to little more than your preference in looks, the underlying messaging rings clear. You're representing a side now, and in Brink's multiplayer-centric world, the success of the team outweighs your own. The good soldier is less interested in an impressive kill-death ratio than in finding the role best suited to completing the task at hand. Brink's fundamental game centers on tackling a chain of dynamically generated objectives as one of the game's 4 classes. While most objectives require one particular class to undergo the task, be it hacking a terminal with an operative or repairing a point with an engineer, the larger focus lies in creating synergy with each class to succeed. Soldiers excel at leading the charge and keeping ammo supplies constantly in stock, with medics there to keep the momentum going with health buffs and clutch resuscitations. Engineers are masters of holding the fort, focusing on damaging buffs and deployables to bolster a team's position, while operatives shine at subterfuge, slipping undetected behind enemy lines to hack turrets and nab a stealthy kill or two. There's a good feeling of balance and texture between the classes, encouraging players to approach every situation with the freedom to switch to any given role on the fly. Team players fighting for the greater good are duly rewarded outside of battle, earning experience points that eventually translate into additional character levels, aesthetic options, and abilities over time. Customization definitely comes off strong, with tons of creative options to express yourself, both visually and mechanically. Brink's character system doesn't constrain you in the way that conventional loadouts do, letting you experiment to your heart's content with unorthodox class, weapon, and ability combinations. Even weapons aren't safe from the game's obscene sense of creation, allowing you to create truly grotesque implements out of attachments unlocked from challenge mode. With only a finite number of extra skills to unlock, choice definitely bears some importance here. If nothing seems to stick, you can respec at a slight XP loss or level up another freedom fighter on the side. While Brink makes a strong case for its fundamental team game, the modes that support it are a little less convincing by comparison. The game tries to blur the lines between single and multiplayer, with its forgettable campaign mode, whose maps and general flow are identical to that seen in the free-play multiplayer option, and whose narrative is so sparse that it's hardly worth the effort. Bots fill in as moving targets online, but prove to be enormous headaches when playing offline, and they're woefully inadequate as squad mates if you go it alone. Trying for some of the more difficult campaign missions solo is an exercise in futility, so you're best advised to keep your game open to visitors, invite some pals, or stick to free play altogether. Contrasted by its innumerable customization options, Brink isn't a particularly huge game, sticking mainly to its core multiplayer experience. Players may find a change of pace with the switch-hitting stopwatch mode, but the scant 8 maps at launch and the 8 versus 8 team limits will definitely rankle some shooter fans out there. When the class dynamics and interactions click, you definitely see the game work in a way that few shooters do. It's too bad that there just isn't a larger venue for it all in the end. Brink's brand of battle combines firearms, class skills, and movement into a complex matrix of actions, giving players plenty of unique choices to approach a firefight. Very often, the quickest solution lies in peppering targets with the game's small arsenal of weapons, ranging from rifles and miniguns to SMGs and handguns. If judged solely by its gunplay, the weapons feel distinct to the touch, made even more unique by whatever manner of attachments you've slapped onto them. The default controls are easy to pick up, even if you've neglected to choose one of the mock settings, aping popular franchise setups. But you may find that enemies can be surprisingly resilient at times, bolstered by skills, buffs, and map bonuses that beget extra health pips, as well as a rather ineffectual grenade that doesn't seem to have much bang. Dropping an enemy on your crosshairs surely amounts to one less threat to worry about, but making the biggest impact in a match boils down to how well a team rallies together to use each class's unique abilities. Finding the best use of your engineer's turret or the operative's sneaky disguise adds a dynamic to combat that can't easily be ignored, and the skills only get better and more interesting with time as you invest into each of the separate class ability pages. Brink's smart system adds the intriguing element of parkour to the mix, theoretically allowing players to chart out impressive courses that cut straight through the urban jungle with the hold of a button. In truth, the actual execution is only half as exciting. You can only latch on to about half the things you'd normally expect to, the light body type's ability to wall jump is far too situational, and the level designs don't seem to intrinsically call out some useful applications for it, at least in the most obvious tactical sense. It's not all for naught, though. The ability to slip into a slide provides a neat little mechanic to evade gunfire, as well as set up enemies for an easy coup de grace. With more than a few winks to the similarly stylized Borderlands, Brink dresses up its vivid cartoon world with a wash of color and attitude. The environments are varied and interesting throughout, with Resistance territory marked by a rough scrapyard look, opposite to the Ark's pristine and nearly alien-like architecture. Likewise, the characters themselves show some distinct personality, with some particularly neat options in clothing and accessories down the road of progression. Only the jerky-looking cutscenes, which ambitiously try to incorporate participating player models in real time, are to blame in this otherwise decent production. Texture streaming can also be a bit anemic, leading to some muddy-looking stages, along with the occasionally amusing mishap.
Hardly any ammo left!
Despite failing to live up to some of its bold promises, Brink lands on its feet with an enjoyable class-based shooter that most anyone with a true taste for teamwork will take to. You may find a few hurdles to jump over, but if you're looking for a solid and fun team experience that isn't Team Fortress 2 on the consoles, you could do worse than Brink.